All right. Thank you all very much for being here in what has been a great off-season heading into practice, and excited to talk about this year's team with you. Dating back to last spring and from then until now, I could not be more excited about the progress our program has made. It certainly started with roster management built upon retention, and I think retention gets used a lot, but the right retention, and then complemented in the transfer portal, which has brought together what I just have been amazed at how close and connected a group can be in a short amount of time, and we certainly have that here. In addition to that, we've laid a great foundation on what it means to play with great urgency and competitive spirit, and then also that chemistry that we've had off the court, and was evident right away, has been apparent between the lines as well. So still got a lot of work to do to get ready for what is, again, another tough schedule, but I couldn't be more happy with the progress that's been made since the conclusion of last season, and really excited about this group.
Jake, you're a week into practice. What have you learned about this team when you've been able to go live against each other, and what has these first 7-8 days been like for you?
Yeah, well, I think you got to look back at what our goals were this summer, and we wanted to get stronger. So a lot of what we did outside of the court was to build strength and lay a really firm foundation. So I anticipated our conditioning maybe not being great with the start of practice, but our guys have been better than I thought they would be. So I've loved the pace that we've been able to play at so far. We've been charting possessions per 40 minutes based on how we've been playing, and been really excited about those numbers so far. But the chemistry that I talked about has been evident, from the start of practice all the way through now. What is 6 practices, I think, or 6 or 7 practices. So it's been great, Adam. Really excited. We've been able to compete every single day, every time we're on the court, and I think that's helped us. We're viewing things through a lens of everybody who's been here since June. He was around, got to watch, but couldn't participate, and then missed stretches because he was gone with his national team. So sometimes I got to remind myself of that, and I've just been really impressed with the progress he's made so far.
And then Kristoff's been a guy, and he's going to the media days. He seems like front and center. Like, has he taken on a leadership role in his locker room in the short time he's been here? What have you seen in that respect, Kristoff?
I think he's learning, figuring out where he's comfortable, and the beautiful thing about this team is he can be the best version of himself. That certainly is as a player. I think the way we're playing, he fits perfectly in the system we're trying to play this year. But also from a leadership standpoint, you have some bigger, louder voices in terms of leadership on this team. But his production is going to be important. His minutes are going to be there. And I think his leadership and how he leads is equally important, because it's different than some of the other guys. So he seems really comfortable with that.
A lot of players are high on Amari, saying that he's a dark horse. What caught your eye about him in practice, and his just evolution from day one to now?
Yeah, I love coaching Amari, and he plays the game with a joy and an eagerness to get better. That I think that level of humility and just consistency is rare for young players. And so he's certainly talented. He's got some great physical tools, but he has had not just 1 or 2 high-level, practices or moments since June, but he's had multiple, stretches of high-level basketball and productive basketball, which is, equally hard for young players to do early on. But make no mistake, you can coach him hard. You can push him. He wants to get better. He's eager to get better, and he loves the game. And it is evident every single day he's here. And I think that's really impressive and a big-time quality in a young player.
Yeah, Jake, big picture. I assume that you have team goals. Do you rank them? Is there a pecking order? And if so or not, where is making the NCAA tournament in terms of the team concept, team goal?
Yeah, well, I think you can look on the back wall and see, what the standard is, in my opinion, of where this program should be tracking towards. And I don't apologize for having big expectations, right? I've been very consistent with that from the day I got this job. much to, the dismay of people who would say, you're setting the bar too high, or you're doing, like, Ohio State basketball, I believe, belongs as one of the best programs in the country. However, right, like, talking about it isn't enough. We got a lot of work to do to get there. I think, disappointed in how we finished the season last year, for sure. But we don't go into the season just wanting to do that. Like, we're not setting a lower bar because maybe the program hasn't been there in the past. Like, to me, the bar in this program should always be at the very top. It's hard to do, I understand that. There's a lot of factors that influence your ability to do that on a year in, year out basis. But across the board, we've made progress in a ton of areas. Most importantly, I think our roster. And so we're shooting for the moon, and that's kind of how we operate every single day. So our guys know that, so it's not something we have to talk about every day, right? Like, we want to back up those standards with how we work, the consistency of our work, our competitive spirit, the toughness we're bringing into the court. So I grew up watching Ohio State basketball that had some unbelievable stretches, and certainly notably my brother playing here. And I remember when that team was number 1 in the country. I understand we didn't do that last year. However, I'm not going to lower the bar of where I want this program to be because we didn't get the result we wanted. We're going to fight, scratch, and claw every single day to get this program back to that level. However long it takes, that's what we're doing.
Did you watch the tournament last year?
I watched towards the end of the tournament. I didn't watch the first couple rounds. I've gone back since and watched some games just because I think you constantly want to see things you can pick up, and there's some things schematically that we're trying to do this year that we weren't able to do last year. We tried in the preseason, we just couldn't quite get the concepts down, so we had to shift a little bit. I think we have the roster to be able to execute some of those things. So I went back and watched some tournament games to see some teams who maybe do some similar things, and just take some notes, pick up some things, and see how they can apply to us.
Did you not watch because it was just too painful?
It made me sick. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I think disappointed certainly, and it was the wound was fresh. I think again, when you reference last year, like it's instantly a reminder of, we got to get this thing back to where it belongs, and that's what we're working towards every day.
First, talk about not putting the pressure on himself to shoot, enjoying it more. Did you sense that he's done that to himself too much in the past? How do you see him now that he
He does seem different. I wish you guys could watch this first week of practices. He's been unbelievable, and there seems to be he seems to be playing just lighter, I guess, in a figurative way. He's got a joy to him. He's competing at such a high level. He's even talking a little trash at times. Like he seems laser focused on this team getting better each and every day, him taking ownership over, as a leader. But it seems very easy for him now to block out any kind of peripheral stuff and just focus on getting better. It's been really impressive. He's played at a really high level so far. Well, I think he still, and he and I have talked, like, we're not just satisfied with how he did personally last year, right? We both have big goals for this team, but even for him personally, continuing to raise his level and finding a way to get, he was an unbelievable player last year. There's no doubt, but he wasn't perfect. He still got room to grow in some areas. So we've really attacked those in his individual work. But if Bruce Thornton can be just a little bit better, that obviously is going to be great for Ohio State basketball. I do think it could look a little different. I think because of this roster, because of the way we're going to be able to play, it's going to open up some different opportunities for him. And we got more playmaking this year than we had last year, which can take some of the load off of him and maybe find some ways, which we did towards the end of last season with Junie, but we have other guys too who can find some ways to give Bruce an easier basket that he doesn't just have to create for himself, in such a difficult way.
Kind of sticking with that point there, just the most versatile team you've had in the way that you play with the
to play and approach games to go out with basketball games?
I think without question, it's this team, is significantly deeper than last year. The experience of this team compared to last year is it's been impactful already. And we went into this offseason, it was important for us to play with more pace and more versatility and less called sets, more free-flowing concepts. It was important to raise our collective basketball IQ. I think certainly experience helps with that, right? We lacked, when you look at the top part of our rotation, or the main part of our rotation last year, we lacked experience. Even our sophomores last year didn't have, the type of experience that, as freshmen that Junie Mobley had as a freshman last year. So experience helps with that, and then we targeted specific, I think, call it basketball characteristics in the portal to complement the guys that we had and also fit the way we want to play. So I feel like this team's able to be more like what we want to be as a program moving forward. And, I really appreciate, I think the fight, the stick together, scratch and claw all the way to the end of the season mentality that our team had last year, considering all the adversity we faced. But every year you get a chance to kind of adapt and change your roster. I feel like we did a really good job with that.
You probably touched on some of this in answers to your other question, but the question I get a lot when this team comes up is, why are they going to be better than last year? I've talked about the guys and that you've added and stuff, but maybe deeper than that, why is this team better equipped to win games in the Big Ten and maybe end up, like you're saying, doing some of those things at the end of the season?
Listen, I think if you really dive into the analytics of last year's team, there were some clear deficiencies that we had. I think first and foremost, it started with rebounding, on both sides of the ball. We were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten at second chance points per game, and then we were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten at defensive rebound percentage. So immediately, part of that certainly was a size issue for us last year. We went into the season thinking we were going to play a certain way, dealt with some stuff, right, that interrupted that, and then we had to pivot as best we could throughout the season as we faced, roster attrition from one or two guys being out to guys being out for significant stretches and so on and so forth. So we wanted to certainly be able to play bigger. Part of that was moving Devin Royal more to the perimeter. Yeah. And, I know a lot of people thought I was crazy for that, and that's fine, but I think it fits exactly what we want to do. I think he's done a great job with it. It works well with the guys we brought in the portal and Brandon and Christoph. And so, we're bigger across the board. Last year we were going into a lot of Big Ten games 6'6" and 6'8",
yeah,
right, at the 4-5, with two guards who, Bruce plays a lot bigger than he is, but two guards who are under, 6'3". This year, when you look at the lineups we could put on the floor, it's just significantly bigger. It's not only taller, but it's more physical. So I think simply through some of the roster changes we made, we've begun to address the rebounding things. And we're going to adjust some schemes as well, particularly going to the offensive glass. That'll help us with that too. Now, right, it's one thing right on paper, it's another thing to go out and do it. But I think we've got some proven rebounders throughout their career. We've got some guys who, can really, help us be better in those areas. That was a big issue for us. Another issue for us was our free throw rate of our opponents. We were the worst in the league at sending people to the free throw line. I think a big part of that was inexperience. You don't fully understand and appreciate how valuable experience is until you maybe don't have it. And there were simple things where maybe you're a half step late just because you haven't seen that stuff for 2-3 years in a college career, and that mattered. And then, I think there were also times where we struggled transferring what we worked on to game time. Right, because in this league, you have to be able to change in the flow of the game. You can't change who you are, but you got to be able to adjust. We struggled at times to do that, and I think again, fouling resulted in that. Like, for us to have the defense we had last year and be so poor at rebounding and fouling too much, like it says that what we were doing wasn't broken. We didn't finish possessions as well as we need to. So it's been a huge thing for us. We've talked about with our players and certainly amongst our staff, we own those margins that we can be better at. And when you look at the end of the season of just how close we were, by all accounts, probably one game, right? One right game away of playing in the NCAA tournament. Those margins, that's the difference. So we've really tried to attack those. There's other things too. We've certainly dove into this, but I think another thing for us was assist rate.
Okay.
And that was another thing for us where, we had an efficient offense, and quite honestly, we had to call, significantly more set actions than I would prefer to, but that's what fit that team as the year went on. This team is really gifted at playing off of each other, reading situations, and so our assist rate in practice has been a major improvement. We'll see how that translates when you see, but right now we know what's coming as a defense, and we're still, a lot of our field goals are assisted. So I think those three areas in particular have all been improvements. Now we just obviously need to carry that over into game time.
What about you? Obviously, first year as a head coach, I'm sure you had expectations going in. What did you learn about the profession, yourself, the team, kind of all of that maybe you didn't know when we sat here at your...
Yeah, well, I think, when you consider the whole picture of last year, it was like getting a doctorate in coaching. When I went into the start of the season, you anticipate things changing, you anticipate adversity, but I don't think anybody could have anticipated all the stuff we dealt with. And then on top of that, 11 out of our 32 games or whatever, 33 games were decided by 2 possessions or less. So, yeah, I'm not afraid to stand up here and say I'm a better coach now than I was this time last year. I think that's part of it. But I also think there's little things behind the scenes, understanding, where my time is best spent throughout the course of a day. And in my opinion, that's always going to be with our players. So figuring out how to do that at the highest level and delegate and do that stuff has all been part of the evolution of last season. And again, I think we did a lot right. I think there was a lot of good things we did last year. We got to build upon those, make those even better, but certainly, look ourselves in the mirror, make some changes, and look myself in the mirror and identify areas where certainly I needed to be better, but also, figuring out how to utilize this unbelievable staff that I have around me and figure out how to utilize them better. And I feel like I have. So I feel like we're clicking on all cylinders right now. It didn't feel like we were able to do that throughout the course of the season last year for a lot of different reasons. But, I feel like we're doing that right now, and we're prepared for when that adversity comes, because it's Big Ten basketball and you're going to see it. I think we're prepared to keep operating on all cylinders when that happens.
You kind of follows up on that, but obviously you talked about those big goals you guys have, and the program has not been able to reach those goals for several years. What are the biggest things you look at that you guys just need to do differently in order to get to those goals that you want to get to?
Yeah, it's been a long time in this program, dating back to, it's been over a decade, right, since the program's been at that level. So again, it's really hard to sustain that level of success in today's landscape. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I understand that, but we set the bar at the highest level here. That's just how I'm wired. I think that's how our guys are wired, and we got to continue, to strive for that every single day. I think we're doing everything behind the scenes to best position ourselves, to do that. And there's, again, a lot of factors that go into it, but you can look at scheduling. We certainly scheduled hard this year, but it may be a little different than what it was last year. There's just different little things, and the way my mind works, in order to get there, you got to be willing to step back and look at every single area and be willing to really evaluate, how can we raise our level, even if it's just a little bit, in every single area. And that's what we've been focused on this off season. So I think by doing that, you're automatically starting a little further ahead than maybe where you were. And in this league, I think it's about getting momentum. Everybody's like, you're going to see different Big Ten schedules, but everybody's schedule's hard in the Big Ten. Like every Big Ten schedule's hard. And we, I think, have 4 3 games in 7 days stretches this year. And it's all hard. Home, road. Another way to get back to that is, we got to protect our home court better. There were multiple games last year that we should have closed out that we didn't. And we've certainly gone back, watched those multiple times, dissected all that stuff. But I'm appreciative of Ross and his leadership and the investment that they put into our program since last season. There's some real improvements happening in the shot. And yeah, we got our schedules teed up that if we can really get this thing rolling, we're going to have some unbelievable atmospheres down the stretch of the season. When you look at some of those games we have at, end of February and March, we get some momentum. I think all that stuff matters to helping us get a home court advantage to some degree. But new lights, new sound, new floor, a lot of new stuff happening. And, I'm just really appreciative of his leadership and kind of, leading the charge and helping with that stuff. Because, you want to compete for Big Ten championships and that you got to protect your home court too. It's certainly part of it.
Hey, Coach. Tyson Chapman, just how has his health been, and what role, if he's healthy, do you kind of foresee for him? And it feels like he's the guy that could really help provide some minutes for you if he's healthy.
Yeah, his health is great. I think that's been, sometimes he's been so consistent from really last spring to now that I forget sometimes what he's gone through the last couple of years, because he's been in there, every day. And I think it's important to remember that he's yet to have a true kind of freshman year. And, we experienced some of those maybe young player mistakes at times, but, for him, the biggest thing is he's gifted with the ball in his hands. He's gifted at catch and shoots, playing off others. He's just got to continue to get better with some of the physicality and the pace of the game, particularly on the other side. As that continues to get better, it just raises the potential of impact that he can have. But again, I don't want to keep talking about last year, but an issue last year was our bench production. We were, again, one of the lowest teams in the conference at being, getting bench production. So I think our depth this year and the type of depth we have, again, fixes an issue from last year. And he certainly, I think, helps with that depth that we have, no question.
Tilly, feels like he could be a mismatch and draw the big man out onto the perimeter and shoot a little bit. But at the other end, do you feel like he's going to be sturdy enough? Interior defense was a big problem for you guys last year. Just do you feel like he's going to be a guy that can defend without fouling and do what you need to do together and protecting the rim?
Well, you can ask Yvonne how hard it's been, to guard him, because he's getting to go against him the bulk of the minutes every day. But yeah, I think offensively his versatility, and I feel like we've almost unlocked another level because, he and I have spent a lot of time in the gym. I think he understands, clearly the expectations for him as far as, kind of what's aggressive look like in our system, and it is more threes than he's used to, and it is putting the ball on the ground more than he's used to. So you're going to see him scoring at multiple levels, and I think it really puts the defense in a bind. On the other side, we got to do some things, schematically to help protect him, certainly, and we're working on those every day. But he is big, he is strong, and I think we have multiple guys we can put in there to combat other teams who have size as well, and protect him from being in foul trouble.
Coach, I want to ask you, you mentioned scheduling earlier. It's not as easy as people think it is. How do you go about talking to coaches about this? How do you go about scheduling a home game?
Yeah, scheduling is nowhere near as easy as anybody thinks it is. That's putting it mildly. I think it's important to note, again, I worked for Thad Matta here when, we didn't leave Columbus, it felt like, until January, right? And I think those days are long gone. And so there's a couple factors that have gone into, I think, the change, and in particular the non-conference schedule, right? That's what we're referencing. First things first, we're playing more Big Ten games than ever. So that's 2 additional high major home games that we didn't have, or one, I guess, I'm trying to think on the last 116, yeah, at least one high major game that we have that we didn't have before, right? So that's another high quality opponent. Then, you consider that for the past few years, you've been able to increase your NIL access for your team through scheduling. That's been another factor. And so you're seeing less and less teams schedule home and home games, which has impacted that schedule. We've tried, I promise you, it has not been for lack of effort. We have tried to schedule, aggressively as far as bringing in another high major into our gym. I think getting a home and home with a team like Notre Dame, who, I think if you ask anybody, is primed for a huge year this year, and the regional aspect of that and the history across all sports, right? Like I think that's a big time home game. And that weekend, with Jerry Lucas statue, Ohio State versus UCLA, us versus Notre, like that's a big time weekend for Buckeye fans. And the way that came together, I'm really proud of, because it was a lot of work. Moving forward, we want to continue to schedule a high major non-conference home game. We'll see with the added game what it looks like, year in, year out, and how the NIL rules continue to change. But I guess no one really knows exactly how they're changing, but we got to kind of evaluate that. But make no mistake, we're trying every single year as best we can to bring in a high major team into our gym.
Last couple of years, started Connor on the right.
Jake, you're just talking about the margins being so raised with them to get into the tournament potentially. And I think you played 9 one-possession games last year with 2 or 3 in a row in the middle of the year.
5. It was 5 in a row, right? First time in 126-year history of Ohio State basketball, but who's keeping track? Yeah, it's always a fine line of evaluating those type of situations, because we all know the games, the outcome of the game shouldn't come down to one play, but it's a results-driven business, and that tends to determine the result. I think it's very easy to sit there and we can reflect back and say, like, man, what if, and certainly there's an element of that. I think someone told me, and you can fact check, we were like one of the most unlucky teams in the country. I don't know how you determine that, but that didn't make me feel any better. So I think the way I approach that, right, is taking a deep dive and really going back and watching like the last 5-6 minutes, figuring out certainly, okay, what could we have done differently to maybe put us in a little bit better situation at the very end. A lot of times when you do that throughout the course of our season last year, we had some self-inflicted wounds. We fouled shooters. We didn't complete possessions with a rebound, or we struggled to execute out of a timeout. Like, there were little things like that certainly could have upped our chances. But yeah, some teams made those, some teams didn't, and oftentimes the degree of difficulty of the shot was probably pretty close to being the same. That's basketball. I think it's one of the beauties of this game. So I go back even further when we evaluate those and figure out how do we not, instead of being up 1 or down 1, how can we be up 3 or 4? How can we, and like, listen, we practice end of game situations all the time. And I just, because of the respect I have for this league, we did it all the time last year. And we'll continue to do it all the time, because that's Big Ten basketball. So it's important to evaluate how we can do better leading into those end of game moments. And then, you're also learning your team as the season goes on, who's most comfortable in those situations. And I think we got a great feel for that right now. I mean, if you could have watched practice yesterday and seen our end of game execution, it wasn't perfect, but for September, it was big time. And, we had some guys make some big time shots. And then, because I'm wired the way I am, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, why'd the defense let that happen? So it's, when you're practicing, you're never happy, because you got both sides of the ball to look at. But I think we certainly learned a lot going back and reflecting through that. I think our players who are returning learned a ton. Great experience. And there's really so much value in experience, and we got a lot of it last year.
Time for this 2 phones. Pat.
On the schedule topic, I know it was big for you to have more home games on the weekends, the Michigan home and home, so to speak. Looks like you got some of that. Just how excited are you to A, have those, and B, that your voice was heard?
Yeah, I think the one thing, to remember about last season is it was a first for everybody. And, we clearly were heard on, my complaints about our lack of home weekend games. I think we doubled them from 2 to 4, so I'd like more, but we'll take it, we'll take that. And then I just, as soon as kind of our schedule came out last year, I think because of my respect for the history of this program and that rivalry, it just was too important, I feel like, to not have that rivalry protected. And so I went to the Big Ten. They told me to go talk to Dusty. It wasn't a long conversation. He didn't take him long to say, yeah, I agree. And then we kind of had a collective front, and they got it done. So it's great for Ohio State fans. It's great for Team Up North fans. It's great for Big Ten. Those games are always, for all the reasons, they're always highly viewed games, and so I'm excited about those two things, certainly.
Ken Palmetti, 334th in luck last year, by the way. That was so.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks. You can do a couple more if you need to, Gary. It's fine.
You mentioned like the uncertainty with NIL rules and things like that. How is that impacting recruiting right now? What are you telling recruits in 2026 or 2027 when they ask, like, what can I get? What can I do when I get if I were to come here?
It's a really unique time right now in college basketball because we don't know exactly what we're dealing with next year. This is a really important planning time for the future, and we're doing it with limited information or so much uncertainty. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to recruits. It's not fair to recruits and their families and agents and all the parties, right, that are involved as you try to make these decisions. So I think there's certainly an element of trust that has to exist to be able to kind of get to some conclusion. And timelines have changed in recruiting. It's a different time now, and that's okay. But the biggest thing for me is we always want to be about getting the right guys in this program. That's why I'm so excited about this roster right now. We've done that, and recruiting obviously, and we will always recruit high school players here, and that's an important part as we plan for next year. But it's hard right now. I mean, there's no other way around it. And that uncertainty, we feel it, they feel it. I think everybody involved feels it. So it's just really hard, and we need some stuff set in stone, some better guidance.
Who needs to do what to get clarity for that?
Well, you could just make me in charge for a day, and I think I could. No, listen. I think there's a lot of effort, really, on all parties to come to some conclusions quickly. There's a lot of things out there kind of floating around that potentially what next year could look like. We just got to get some decisions made. So, whether it's the leadership team of coaches and collaboration with, the team of the NCAA, they put some things in place to get things done quicker than it used to be. It just a lot of times, I think our calendar doesn't align with football's, and that impacts things as well. So. It's moving in the right direction. It's just, it's not as fast as we would like, but I think it's faster than it's been. So there's progress being made. We just kind of taking it one day at a time right now.
Jake, on raising the collective IQ of the team, how do you do that aside from just practice, and then how do you test it?
Yeah, well, I think you recruit for it. Experience is a huge factor in that, right? Like when you add 30 or 60 college games to a player's experience level, they're going to be a higher basketball IQ. That's a baseline. Then we tried to look at guys who have been in. I think because of the time frame we had to make decisions, we targeted specifically some guys who played in systems that reflect. Certainly not identical, but reflect some of the things that we are trying to do, because I think that speeds up that, transition process. And I think that plays a role. So the most important ingredient is experience, but we got guys who are students of the game. We got guys who watch a lot of film. We have guys who can play multiple positions. That helps. I think that's a sign of that as well. So it starts though with experience. I think when you look at the guys we brought in the portal, I mean, you know, Brandon's got a ton of experience. Tilly's got a ton of experience. Gabe has a lot of experience. He's been in college for 2 years. You know, he had a full year playing. So I think that was a starting point for us. Yeah. I think we don't fear playing in the half court. You know, the way our offense is being built, we can play in the half court if a team slows us down to that point. But we don't have to stop, look over at the bench, call a set every time to do it. And I think that's the encouraging thing. And we can get to actions a little quicker because we have some interchangeable parts. You know, part of last year, you know, we had to play a little bit slower, and I think we played faster than Ohio State's played in a long time, but it was a little bit slower at times because, you know, we had to help us by calling sets. It was a little less about maybe what the defense was doing. It was more to help us, help script things for us, because, you know, we just weren't collectively at a high enough level to kind of react the whole game. We're in a position, I think, that we can do that more. So even if a team can slow down our initial push, we can grind out a possession in the half court without calling a set. We'll still call sets because we'll call some quick hitters. We'll utilize some mismatches we can create with the versatile pieces we have. I think versatility plays a huge role in that. But I think this team, you know, can withstand a lot of different schemes against it. It can withstand a lot of different coverages and you know, attempts to either slow down or speed us up. I think we're built to see a lot of different stuff, but within that, be remaining true to who we are as a team.
I hit one. Brandon Noel, I don't know how much you talked about him, but what he brings and possibly defend a five, can he step out and shoot, just all the different things. It looks like a lot of things he can give you.
Yes.
Yes to all that.
Yeah. I think, you know, tons of experience, again, a lot of production in college, certainly, but every bit of 6'8", 245 pounds too, which is also, you know, I mean, he would have been our biggest guy on last year's team, you know, as far as rotationally. So I've been really impressed with him. You know, it's a big transition to go from really having the ball in your hands all the time, having that level of production, you know, now moving to this level, going up a level, and then playing with, you know, what is a collection of really good players. And there's a sacrifice involved in that, but to his credit, he's figured out how to play off others at a really high level. He's got great instincts on kind of when to cut and how to create shots with his movement off the ball. He's really good at going to the glass. You can post him, he can shoot it. Again, he can score at multiple levels. So I've been really impressed with Brandon so far. All right, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.